Let there be light and welcome to Living Essence. I am Sarantarananda. Today I am sharing about the Christ you never knew. I spent 13 years in the church. I was also a worship leader and a deacon, and even though my family wasn't raised Christian, none of my family are Christians or anything, I became a Christian after 2 years after having a spiritual awakening and fell into Christianity. Yet it was all meant to be. It was all part of the plan. It was all what was always going to unfold. And so I'm very grateful for every moment that I spent in the church and everything that I learned in my journey through the church. Even though I am not part of the institutional church now, I do have the understanding that I am the church. So there's nowhere that I can go where Christ is not. And not that I worship a man called Jesus up in the sky anywhere. That also became an understanding of mine when I spent time in the church and saw that for many in the institutional church, they had been hamstrung because everything that was important to them, they imported. Everything that was important was imported off to heaven. And so they were always living on a dream and never in a reality of a spiritual connection to Christ. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, the Christ you never knew. We are, this weekend is Easter weekend. And even though it's a pagan ritual, it's all under the Gregorian calendar and the rituals that were in place of Easter, which comes from the goddess Esther. There's so many things that are connected in the pagan rituals. What a lot of the Celtic Christians did is they took over these pagan rituals and integrated Christian ideology to kind of, again, it's an integration. They're like, let's help people understand the Christian message by bringing it together with some of the pagan understanding. So we have a lot of Puritan ideas these days that Christians can be very fundamental about, you can't believe in this and you can't believe in that, and be careful of energy healing and yoga and all. This whole idea of integrating pagan ideology with Christian theology has been done for decades and centuries. And so we do not need to stress about that because Christ is the central message here. And what is Christ? The one who is sent, the promise, the gift, the one who is anointed. It is Christ. Jesus Christ was a man. So Jesus was a man. Christ is a title. Okay, so Christ was not his last name. Christ was the title. So Jesus, the one that was sent. Okay, simply sent. The one that was promised. The one that was anointed. And what did Christ teach us? Well, we need to go all the way back to the garden. In the Garden of Eden, which again is a metaphor. Everything in the Bible we really need to look at metaphorically. Why do I say that? There are no true stories. I'm always saying to people there are no true stories. Why? Because we all know there's two sides to every story. Which one's true? Well, it's neither that any are true or any are wrong. That is all about perspective. So what did Christ do? Christ came to bring us perspective, and this is what I hope you hang in through this video, because this is the most important part. The reason we miss Christ is we get hung up on the story. The story is not the truth. The truth is in the story. It must strike the heart. And that's where, when Christ said, I came to bring a sword. I came to divide. There will be father against child, and all these things will happen. So things are going to get really difficult to follow the Christ. Because what happens is there'll be people that are connected and attached to their ego. And then when you awaken and you start to die to your ego, just as Christ did, it's going to cause issues within your family, within your work, all sorts of things. But you can integrate it for sure. It can be integrated, but it will be painful for a while because the ego does not let go of things lightly. So we go all the way back to the garden, the metaphor of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So what is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that God said, don't eat of that? Now, it never said in the Bible that God said, I don't want you to eat of that. God never said, I don't want you to eat of that. He said, don't eat of it, for in the day that you do eat that fruit, you shall surely die. He didn't say, I'm telling you, I don't want you to. He's just saying, don't do it. So he's setting things up. He's setting up a story, a narrative that's about to take place. Were they going to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Absolutely, because they did. But it was a metaphor, and each of us do this each and every day. We can eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or we can, I'm pointing to my heart here, eat from the tree of life. So what is the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil? It is judgment. To know good and evil and to eat of it is to judge. So the metaphor of Adam and Eve is that, first of all, we judged our gender. Now, isn't that interesting? Because what are we doing more than anything right now is we are judging our gender, big time. So we've sort of come right back around again, where we're thinking, really going into eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, eating that fruit, which is judgment. We are judging our gender. They hid from each other. They hid their sexuality. They covered their parts. They realized that it says their eyes were opened and they saw they were naked. And when God turned up, God said, well, who told you you were naked? No one told them. God didn't tell them they were naked. They had decided within themselves. We looked at each other and we decided to judge each other as naked. It was humanity that looked and judged and said, nakedness is not good. This is after God had created everything and said, it is good. It is good. So we have that judgment. From there, they not only just judged each other, their gender, they then judged their divinity in connection to God. God said to Adam, what happened here? He said, Adam said, that woman that you gave me, she gave me the fruit and I ate. So he passes all the blame instead of just saying, I ate the fruit, taking full responsibility for self, hands it on to Eve. So God's like, okay, I kind of left you in charge, but obviously you're not in charge. She's in charge because she must have power over you. If she gave to you and you were so influenced and you took, then she must be the one in charge. She went to Eve and said, what happened here? And she said, the serpent, he deceived me and I ate. Oh, okay, so neither you are in charge here. I'd left Adam in charge. I thought he was in charge, but no, he had abdicated his authority and then gave it to you, and then you gave it to the devil, the serpent, the accuser. And what did the devil say? Didn't say a word. So when it says that all authority was given to the devil, it was given to the devil by man because they abdicated their position. Because they were judging. When you judge, you abdicate your divinity. God said, you guys are in charge. Oh, no, you're not in charge. Oh, and you're not in charge. And the devil kept its mouth shut. The one that accuses kept its mouth shut because then it wasn't handing on the responsibility to anyone else. It was saying, I'm responsible. I did it. And then all the power. When you say, yes, I did this, and you take full responsibility, the power is in your hands. So let's fast forward 4,000 years later, where Christ, and this is all metaphor, Christ is being placed on the cross. Now, what did Christ do the whole time in his ministry? Prior to that, he judged no one. He judged no one. He embodied the feminine energy of acceptance. He didn't do anything as such as he was just a presence. As much as he was embodied as a man, he was embodying the feminine energy. He did not force anything. Things happened around him. People were healed around him. He simply placed hands, which is a picture of nurture. Christ nurtured people. He loved people. He accepted people. All feminine traits, all feminine energy. So Christ embodied both man and female, brought the genders back together. He talked to the woman at the well, talked to a Samaritan woman. So the Jews of the time, the Israelites of the time, they wouldn't talk to Samaritans. They were half-breeds. They were very racist people, incredibly racist. Christ did not judge anyone upon their race, did not judge anyone upon their gender, did not judge anyone upon their divinity. And we know that because on the cross, he looked out and he chose to eat from the tree of life. In fact, he was hanging on the tree, the cross, of judgment. He was hanging on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He should have been the fruit hanging there as the fruit of judgment, but he didn't. His last words, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." This is Christ embodied. This is what we are to learn. We don't project everything off onto Christ and Christ will save me. When we move in the faith of Christ, we embody the Christ spirit and we don't judge. We see all as good, whether it be race, gender, religion even, because there are parts in the Bible as well where Jesus was not judging other people's religions. He did not judge anyone. I judge no one. All judgment has been given to me, Christ said, and I judge no one. Why? Because he knew that to eat from the tree of life was to come to the heart. And when he looked out, and this is the part that we're to learn, this is where the power is, to embody Christ, to know Christ, is to forgive in the moment, is to come to realization, to come to full realization and understanding that my connection is divine. And this person that's persecuting me in this moment knows not what they're doing. Why not? Because they know not who they are. If only they knew that they were a child of God. Christ simply just knew who he was. He knew that within him was the divine feminine and the divine masculine, and he brought them together. He judged no man, no woman. He judged no religion, no creed, no person, and he never judged the creation. So the power of Christ, to embody Christ, to accept Christ, is to judge no one. And what I've come to understand is that the church is one of the most judgmental places I've ever set my foot into. If you don't believe in Christ, you're going to hell. I'm sorry, but that is not what is stated in the Bible. If we follow Christ for what he actually mocked, often brought the ideas that the people had of Judaism, the ideas they had projected onto God. The whole idea of sacrificing animals and sacrificing, bringing burnt offerings and all that, they were pagan ideas that basically, Christ said, my Father doesn't desire sacrifice. He's not after sacrifice. He desires mercy. And what is the greatest mercy of all? Forgiveness. The greatest mercy of all is forgiveness. And when should we take forgiveness? The most powerful part is not, yes, it is forgiveness later on, but if you can embody the Christ spirit, it's forgiveness in the moment. In the moment that you're being persecuted, in the moment that you're being shot down, in the moment that you're feeling the pain that's being projected upon you, you look at that person, you understand that they are you, that they don't realize that they are you, and that they don't realize that they are a child of God. And if only they knew who they were, then they would understand what they were doing was not who they are. Christ said, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. Look at the world. Can we forgive? Look at those that have hurt you. Can you forgive them? You can only forgive them when you realize they don't know what they're doing. And the only reason that they don't know what they're doing is because they don't know who they are. You are a vessel for God. You are he atua he tangata. You are human, you are divine, you are both. The human part of you is not true. Don't get attached to it. Don't get all bound up in it. It's an expression. It is the story. You are. The ego and the body, the mind, is the story. But the truth is in the story. And the truth, there is only one truth, and that is God. And not God up in the sky. The source, the infinite source, is the truth. And the infinite source is carried in the boat that is your life. That is your being. It carries the truth. on the waters of life. So don't go projecting everything off into heaven, because heaven is either here or it's nowhere. Hell is either here or it's nowhere. That everything in the story that we're living is created. That's heaven and hell as a creation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Heaven is a creation. You either create heaven or you destroy heaven. Your ego can break it all down. Your ego, the part that does not know what it's doing. Forgive them, Father, for they are egos. Forgive them, Father, for they are so attached to their ego, they don't realize that they are divine. And they are killing a part of themselves. Forgive them, Father, for they do not realize that they cannot kill the divine. And Christ raised again, and that's what it's all about. When you can let your ego go, then the true you, the infinite you, rises up from the ashes, rises up from the grave. The ego dies and drops away, and the true you rises up. And what is the true you? It's God. Like bubbles in the water. You blow bubbles into the water, and these bubbles rise to the top. Well, what are the bubbles? They're simply air. And when they rise to the top and they burst out into the air, the idea of the bubble, this little cell of air in the water, busts out of the top of the water into the air. There is no bubble. There never was a bubble. It simply was air trapped in the mire of the ocean. And it's interesting because the Bible talks about the sea often, and that is the illusion. It's just, and many things rose up when it talks in Revelation about, and an army rose up out of the sea, and many people came up out of the sea. It's just talking about the sea as a picture of Maya, the story, the illusion. So to move into the power of Christ, the Christ Spirit, is to realize that you are the divine. You are God condensing down just a bubble in the water. Don't get tied up with this. Don't get tied up with the story, with the body, with the mind, with the ego. Enjoy it. Have fun with it. But let the perspective always come from your divine place so that you don't become attached and suffer. Yes, we'll experience sadness, and that's a beautiful thing. Sadness is beautiful if you will allow it to be experienced. But if you are clung to it, if you are attached to it, it's true suffering. Sadness becomes suffering. Anger becomes suffering. Hate becomes suffering. Now, those things are not bad things. They are good things as long as you don't become attached to it. As soon as you become attached, it's called ego. Ego is simply attachment. And so when Christ was being crucified, he was being crucified because of the people's attachments. They were attached to their idea of God, and they had missed it completely. And in doing so, they crucified the Son of God, who is simply themselves. Forgive them, Father, for they do not realize they are murdering themselves. That's the Spirit of Christ. There's nothing you need to project off. There's nothing you need to do. There's nowhere you need to go. Accept yourself in your true essence and enjoy the ego story, because that's what the ego is. The ego is story, and story is ego. And there's no need to be attached. You can let it go and enjoy. You can observe and know your divinity. I'm sending you all so much love. I hope this was a helpful message to you in this Easter, and I'm sending you all my love, and let there be light.